All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the session, Enhancing Congregational Engagement and Collaboration in Community Transformation. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, John David. He's a graduate in the MSW program and will be graduating shortly. His concentration is in community practice, and his internship was at the Waco Regional Baptist Association. The session will last about 1 hour. At the end of the session, please complete the evaluation form and provide it to me along with your CEU attendance sheet so I can initial it. At the end of the day, you'll need to turn your CEU attendance sheet and the CEU registration form at the check-in desk. Join me in hearing from John David.
Thank you very much, Nick, and good morning to every one of you. Thank you very much for creating the time to be here this morning. I'll be talking about enhancing congregational engagement and collaboration in community transformation. Our agenda today, we'll be looking at objective and the purpose of this meeting, and then an overview of my place of internship to give you a little bit of context, and then we'll look at some literature and what they are saying concerning this topic of discussion, and then models of congregational engagement, part of what we have used at my place of internship. And then there will be time for questions and discussion. So feel free to take notes by the side. I've provided that for you. Feel free to take notes and ask me questions at the end as we talk about these issues. So part of what we will be looking at as our objective, at the end of this meeting, we'll hope to learn about some of the models that we have used at Waco Regional Baptist Association in enhancing congregational collaboration and engagement. And then learn more about the integration of faith and practice in this process, and then the role that the association plays in achieving congregational engagement. Let me talk about my place of internship as a way of giving you context to this presentation. So I was an intern at Waco Regional Baptist Association, and Waco Regional Baptist Association started in 1860, and that's 155 years ago, with just 9 churches coming together and wanting to work together to support each other as well as provide certain services to their community. But right now, we have 95 churches within this association spread within Waco and its environs. And the thing about this is that there used to be a time when every church is allowed to be part of the association. But then the present executive director at the point said, well, if you want to be part of this association, at least to run an association, you need some funding. So if you want to be part of the association, there should be some form of financial commitment. It can be, there's no designated amount that you need to pay. Of course, some churches that are big churches, they put in more than smaller churches, but it comes down as low as $200 in a year. But the idea is, if you want to run an association, you should be willing to at least contribute financially. And that brought down the number to 95 churches. And you'll notice that in as much as it is Waco Regional Baptist Association, but it also operates with churches outside Waco. The mission is to serve the member churches as well as their communities. So they are working not just with the churches themselves, but they are also working with the communities where these churches exist. At the association, we have different ministry teams. They call them ministry teams. So we have administrative and running down. The one that is highlighted, the bold and underlined one there, the team there, community ministries team, was where I was serving as an intern. So we have this going on these various teams, but then I was serving with the community ministry. And the community ministry team has 3 different components to it. We have the hunger ministry, the restorative justice and jail ministry, and the collegiate ministry. Now the collegiate ministry, they function, basically they operate at MCC and TSTC. So that's where they operate. Most of my work was around hunger, with the hunger ministry, but I was the intern, the community ministry intern. Part of my role there at the association, congregational engagement. So I was trying to work with different congregations, the local churches, as well as collaboratively working with these various congregations. And then education, did some educative forum and other events meant to enhance understanding among congregation about community transformation. And then support to various congregations. And these come in different forms. Maybe a church wants to start a food pantry or community garden. They contact us and we talk about how we can help them in that process, discuss the process of running that. Now, I'd like to talk about congregational engagement in social services. First of all, when we talk about congregational engagement, the premise of this discussion is the fact that congregations are assets in every given community. So in each community that you go to, congregations are great assets. But it's important that I clearly talk about what I mean by congregations. So when I'm talking about congregations, this is not just limited to churches. We have congregations like temples, Buddhist temple, synagogue, you know, all of those are part of congregations. So when I talk about congregation, I'm talking about a combination of all of this. But because I was interning with Waco Regional Baptist Association, so my presentation will be focused more on the church. But I needed to give this a perspective. So when we talk about, I'd like to go into some evidence, historical evidence, for when we talk about the issue of congregational engagement with the community. Historically, there has been this connection between spirituality and the profession, the social work profession. Jane Addams, in as much as she was part of the process of establishing social work here in the U.S. and also with the settlement house and all that, though she went to the seminary, but there's no clear connection if that came out of the idea of the seminary. But there is this emphasis on the issue of a connection between her spiritual faith and trying to meet the needs of the people in the community. And then we have congregational pastors responding to social needs. An example is Buckner in the mid-19th century. So this is a pastor in Texas who wanted to be part of the process of bringing about change and development in the community and meeting certain needs in the community. So we see congregational pastors involved in meeting some of those needs. Biblical evidence. We have more than 2,000 references in the scripture referring to the issue of children and poverty. We have in Mark 6:8, it talks about justice and kindness. We have passages like Deuteronomy that talks about open-handedness towards the poor. And then we have gleaning from the field. In Ruth 2, there is the issue of Ruth going to glean from a field. And part of the tradition at that time is the fact that you are allowed, when you're harvesting, you deliberately leave some things, some part of the seeds, so that people can also come alongside and pick up. And that will be their way of meeting their own needs. And Leviticus, treating strangers and foreigners well. So when you look at the scripture, there is that connection with even the social work values. So when we talk about the values that we serve with or we operate with in the social work profession, you see that connection even with what the scriptures talks about. And then in the Quran, we have the issue of giving alms. Like I said, when I talk about congregation, it's not just limited to the church. We have the importance of giving alms to people, and that becomes your service to God. And do not oppress the orphan. That is also part of the Quran, and also reward that is given to those who give to the poor. So you see that connection, and this forms a strong premise for engaging congregations even in community transformation. So contemporary evidence, talking about congregational social work, there has been this, like the Congregational Social Work Initiative, the School of Social Work, the emphasis of engaging congregations. And we have some congregations that have employed social workers today. Some of them are licensed and are operating within the church. They might not call them social workers, some might call them social workers, but some, it might just be missions pastor. You know, they have different names given to them, but part of what they do is social work. And then we have parachurch organizations who operate in different settings. They are connected to the church, they run by themselves, but they have that strong root and strong connection to the church. An example of that is like World Vision, Habitat for Humanity. And we have religiously affiliated organizations. And these are organizations, now, when we talk about parachurch organizations and even social workers serving in the context of the church, they connect and all form this idea of religiously affiliated organizations. Now, it is not a church in itself, but then they provide services and have strong connection with the church. And then we have the federal government establishing the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiative, meant to encourage congregations and faith-based organizations in trying to achieve transformation in their given community. Now, in the book by Garland and Yancey, one of the things that they clearly talked about when it comes to the issue of even faith-based organizations, now they were deliberate in using the word religiously affiliated organizations. Because when you talk about faith-based, it's easy to connect it to the church. So they were deliberate in using religiously affiliated organizations because you have, the argument is that there are some congregations that are not faith-based. Maybe their emphasis is on deeds and not really on faith. So the idea of using religiously affiliated organization kind of gives a broader perspective to the issue of congregational work. So why are congregations engaged in community transformation? At this point, I'd like to pause a bit and throw this question to all of us, and let me hear your thoughts about this. Why do you think congregations are engaged in community transformation? Thoughts?
I think they're just kind of a natural part of the fabric of a community. So it's a natural in for them to work on transformation issues because they're already there. They're already part of the community.
Thank you, Kristen.
Or they find that they have some sort of self-interest in doing it, and not using that word in a negative term, but something that they can make a difference in or an impact, some sort of impact that they can see happen, that they can actually do.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very useful contribution, and I appreciate that. Now, one of it, in connection with what we have just talked about, is their faith perspective. Because of their faith perspective, it's easy for them to naturally want to engage with their community. And then we talk about, in Mark, talking about loving God and loving others. And because of this emphasis in Scripture, there is that connection and wanting to respond to what's going on in the community. And then caring for the needy and the vulnerable in Mark 9. And then we also have the increase in social needs. There is a great increase in social needs around us, here in the US and across the world. And because of this great increase, and that's part of what led to people like Bogner beginning even the issue of the orphanage home in trying to respond to these needs that are around us in each community. And then Walter Rushmbush and the social gospel. Now, this is a preacher that was a preacher in New York, and part of what he did as a way of responding to what was going on in this community, he also started talking about the social gospel. I mean, preaching and making connection, the life of Christ, and what we need to do in our community. And so the social gospel became prominent during his time because of that emphasis of living the life of Christ, even in reaching out to our community. So platforms of congregational engagement. Resource brokerage. Now, one of the things that congregations serve as is serving as resource brokers. And this means that they serve as avenues where people can get resources and information. During one of the events, one of the tasks that I did during my internship was to put together an educative forum. And during that educative forum, part of what we did was that we also tried to engage the people that were there in passing out information. So those that came as participants in that event were part of passing out information. First Baptist Church does something outstanding, which is Lift, and they do this annual event where different organizations, different agencies can come together and be there in one place, and different people can come in to receive, to learn about the services that they offer. That is one clear example of the church serving in that place of a broker. And then community ministry. So we have different churches having like hunger ministry, establishing different shelters, and funding and supporting social service agencies. So talking about congregational collaboration. So some congregations, in achieving or in trying to engage with their community in meeting the needs of the community, some churches do it on their own, alone, and some churches work in collaboration with others in doing that. Now, congregations collaborate with agencies and other congregations. 84% of congregations delivering different services, are involved in some kind of collaboration in delivering those services. An example is a church that has a food pantry. One of the church in the association, they have a food pantry, but they receive food from the Capital Area Food Bank, but through Shepherd's Heart. So they give the money to Shepherd's Heart, and Shepherd's Heart, in turn, helps them get the food that they need. Of course, they are working on getting it themselves, but at least for now, part of what they do is work with this agency in having those services. And then 72% of all programs are done in collaboration with others, as this research states. So part of what I did during my internship in trying to build up and talk about collaboration. So we have, it's clear that churches are involved in their communities, are engaged in community transformation, are engaged in trying to meet the needs of the community. Some do it alone, some do it with others. So in my research, I decided to look at the issue of collaboration, intercongregational collaboration in meeting hunger needs in the community. And I did what is called mixed method. So I did qualitative and quantitative research. And the quantitative part, I sampled 15 congregations that have food pantries. So not just congregations with a food ministry, but congregations that have food pantries. And from that, when I asked the question on congregational collaboration, 21% said yes, they collaborate with another congregation in meeting hunger needs, but then 79% say that they do not collaborate with another congregation in meeting hunger needs. And then I also asked the question about collaboration with agencies. So collaboration, the first one is collaboration with churches. The second is collaboration with other agencies. And 36% indicated that they collaborate with other agencies, while 64% indicates that they do not collaborate with other agencies. Now let me backtrack a bit. From this, we have 21% collaborating with other congregations, and then we have 36% collaborating with agencies. That means that we have a higher number of those collaborating with agencies than those collaborating with other congregations. And part of the reason is the example I gave you of partnering with another agency that meets certain needs that you want as a church in meeting the needs of your community. But then moving forward with that, I decided to do a purposive sampling of 6 congregations. Among the 15 congregations, I sampled 6 congregations. So I did interview with 6 congregations, and one of the questions I asked is their openness to collaboration. And when I asked the question if their congregation is open to collaboration, and all of them said yes. So we have all of the 6 indicating that their church is open to collaboration. And then I further asked the question about how they view collaboration. Is this something that is important in meeting hunger needs in their community? And all of them said yes. Now, but this shows that in as much as we have all the congregations saying that they collaborate, that collaboration is important in meeting hunger needs in their community, but not all congregations collaborate. So this leaves us with a question of why, in as much as it is important in meeting hunger needs, in as much as they are open to collaboration, but then it is an intentional act to be able to collaborate with another church or an agency in meeting hunger needs in the community. So how do we enhance collaboration and engagement? Once more, I'm going to engage you at this point, and let's assume that this is a task group, okay? And this means that we have a target, we have a goal to achieve. We're only going to be for a short period of time, maybe for 5 months, let's say 5 months, and within that period of time, we are going to try to enhance collaboration. So we have churches that want to be engaged in the community, as history shows us, and the connection that churches have with wanting to serve their community. And from the research that I conducted, it shows that these 6 churches are open to collaboration, though not all are collaborating in meeting hunger needs in their community. So how can we, as a task group, for instance, engage these congregations in order to enhance collaboration and engagement in the community? Any idea? What would you do?
I think to begin with, maybe you take on the role of facilitating some of these relationships, introducing congregations to one another.
Okay, great. We have 5 months. And let's assume you have the funds to do it.
Maybe you can go with seminars and organizing talk shows and just to enlighten the community about the difference in collaboration and those who are collaborating. So you can have more percentage in those who are collaborating. I think you should the community be able to come to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, because we don't have a lot of time to go on with this meeting, so I'll terminate it. But then assuming you're a task group and you're going to do that, And let me share some of the things that I did in my place of internship. So I organized and facilitated an educative forum, and I did this alone and collaboratively with other colleagues to be able to enhance this collaboration and engagement. We looked at different things. We looked at a variety of issues on social justice, the community responding to the issue of poverty, focus on payday lending, and then the church and mental health. And part of the goal, the purpose of this educative forum, twofold. First of all, to enhance congregational engagement. So we were deliberating this in trying to see how we can bring different agencies, because during the educative forum we had practitioners, we had people from different agencies, as well as the church. So we have a combination of these two, and because of that, even after the meeting, we had people discussing on moving forward, even with the conversation. And so that was a way of enhancing collaboration and engagement between churches and agencies, and even learning from what some churches are doing and what agencies are doing, and ways that we can foster collaboration, because that was the other thing. So we came together and we were asking, what's the way forward? Who can we partner with? Who is doing the same thing we're doing? Who can we engage with in achieving this community transformation? And then I also created awareness. During my stay there, I did presentation in churches and talked about the ministry, what we do, as well as avenues of engaging with the community. And then did presentation at a Christian group, and had lunch meetings with pastors to discuss about not just the issues in the community, but how we can engage other agencies as well as other churches. And then I also visited pastors in their churches and did some educative presentation on what we have and how we can enhance this engagement. Now I'd like to move and talk about some of the models that we have used at our place of internship. One is community development model. And what this is locality, now this is in my place of internship. In the community development model, it's important to note that there is the locality model of community development. And what this means, it's basically the bottom-up approach. Now, if you look at the uniqueness of Baptist churches, the autonomy of the local church, and because of that, it becomes much easier for you to engage each church. So though Waco Regional Baptist Association is operating at the associational level, but then we're basically working with different churches at their level, and it depends on what the church wants to be accomplished. It depends on what the church wants to do. And this model is a participatory model of change. And it is also change from the people. So the association is there to serve, but it comes down to self-determination of our client. And when we talk about client here, we're talking about the church as our client. And then why do we use this model? Because it breaks down barriers, and then it enhances inclusion and gives voice to everyone, because you are incorporating everyone in that process, and lays foundation for community support, as well as help stakeholders acquire new skills and knowledge. One of the things I did was the evaluation of a food pantry. And as what I did at the beginning was to establish a task group, and what we did as that group was to see how we can carry out the evaluation of the food pantry and achieve what we were looking for. And so we did listening session with the client, with the volunteers, as well as the church members, to gather information on the ways to improve the food pantry. So it was more like a collective effort. The emergent planning model. Now, this model occurs when those engaged in the planning process are attentive to political and contextual idiosyncrasies that divert them from their real plan. So this means you have a plan, okay, but then there is that openness that things can come up in that process of your plan that might just be something different from what you initially intended it to be. But you are open to that change, you are open to that input, because understand that the locality development model emphasizes change that comes from the people, change that comes from engagement and participation. So it is an alternative to the rational planning model. It is an alternative to the linear model of planning. So the emergent planning, its strength lies in inclusion of multiple perspective and flexibility to change. So there is inclusion and there is also flexibility to change. So it is not an approach that, it is an approach that talks about not just this is the model that we have and this is how we're going to go through all the way, but it comes with cultural humility. It comes with learning from the people. It comes with applying this in different contexts, because what might be applicable in this context might be different in another context. You have churches who have been operating food pantries for 5 years, and you have churches who just want to start operating one. So, and the churches operate in different contexts. And so it is important to think of the church in that perspective, even as you engage them in this model. So consensus building on the problem as well as the solution. So at the end of it, the intervention is not more of the practitioner giving the solution, but the solution coming even from the people. So this means working with, and what does this mean in the congregational setting? It means working with each congregation based on their context of engagement. And like I said, churches are at different levels. You go to church A, they are fully engaged in their community. They are fully talking about advocacy. They are fully talking about social justice and all that. You go to another church and it's like, what are you talking about? You know, so you need to understand the context. You need to understand the church, where they are coming from, and also the language of the church. Because sometimes when you talk about issues of social justice, for instance, some churches are like, well, they're thinking, especially on the issue of the separation of church and state, it's like, well, we don't really want to go into those issues of advocacy and engaging with certain social issues. But this comes with education on issues like this. So sensitivity to context and incorporating congregations in identifying the problem and the solution, so that when you leave, it becomes their own issue. It becomes, they take ownership of it because they have been part of the process. Then asset-based community development. Now this is local asset as sources of sustainable development. And this is based on the premise that in every community, as you have in most congregations, they have certain assets. For instance, when I had the educative forum, a church provided the auditorium. They also provided drinks. And during the presentation, I drew the attention to the fact that this is one way that the church serves as an asset to the community by allowing us to use their space. We didn't have to pay for it, and they were willing to offer the drink. So we used their facilities for free. And that is the church's way of engaging with this community. So identifying that this is an asset. You know, they have a fellowship hall, that's an asset, and we can use that. So it draws upon existing strength. And then during my time of internship, I did I developed an asset map instrument for the community ministries, meant to bring, gather resources and assets from the congregations covering the hunger ministry, the restorative justice and jail ministry, as well as the collegiate ministry. So it had 3 components to that instrument. And the instrument is meant to help the coordinators of this ministry to be able to gather resources from the various congregations that are within the association. And this is what an asset map, at the end of it, now this is not directly with the instrument that I developed, But this was one that I did during my time of internship. And then you, of course, put the information in different forms, in table forms, as a way of, I use Google Earth, and so when you click on it, it takes you there to the location of the church, as well as some of the assets that these churches have. Integration of faith and practice. Now, when you talk about engaging congregations in community transformation, you have to bring the issue of the integration of faith and practice, because, you know, it becomes easier engaging with congregations when you start with what they know to talk about what they don't know. Faith and then practice. So we have the aspect of faith, and then we have the aspect of practice. And so when you bring these two together in the profession, part of what it does is that it covers three main components. And the first one is the client's faith. And when I talk about the client's faith, I'm talking about if your client is just one person, or a group of people, or the congregation itself, you can take the congregation as your client. And so when you talk about this, you talk about the faith of the client. And like I started by talking about congregations, when you go, for instance, to a Jewish synagogue, you know, your emphasis might not necessarily be on the faith of the client, but it might just be on the issue of what can you do, you know, the issue of deeds and what is important to this client. And this talks about the importance of the faith of the client, and that is an important component in this process. And then the social worker's faith. Each person has his story. Whether you're a person of faith or not, everyone has his journey, and that is also part of the process, because that is part of our influence in life. And then the context that you are working with. Is it a mosque that you're trying to engage? Is it the church you're trying to engage? Where is the church operating? Does the church belong to an association? What do they believe? What do they stand on? For instance, if I talked about the locality development model that emphasizes the issue of the bottom-up approach, but then you see, during my research, one of the things that I discovered is that, okay, during the interview, one of the interviewee mentioned that there are churches that want to be part, so they want to collaborate with other churches who want to be part of what they do in meeting hunger needs in their community. But then because the church operates differently, that means that they go by hierarchy. So it also means that for a Baptist church, once you engage the local church pastor, for instance, and he's on board, it's easy for you to run with it. But then that is not the same with another denomination, who will have to get approval maybe from the bishop before they go ahead to collaborate with you, before they go ahead and engage with you. So you need to understand the context of that church. Implication for practice. And this will also come with some recommendations that I have. Congregations are assets in each community. Before you even begin engaging congregation, it is important that this is settled in your mind, that congregations have an asset to provide in the process of community transformation. And then congregational engagement can enhance community transformation. The question is this, you know, can you go into a community and operate and achieve transformation without a congregation? Yes. But there are certain communities that if you get the congregation on board, it becomes even faster. You know, you're able to cover a wider range, because you have a lot of volunteers that are involved in different congregations. You have a lot of congregations that are supporting different agencies and organizations. So if you have them on board, in as much as you can operate without a congregation, but it will also be effective if you engage the congregation, especially if that connects with their vision and their goal as a congregation. And then congregational engagement requires flexibility. I remember when I was doing the evaluation of the food pantry. I had my timeline. I had a period of time I wanted to terminate with them, but then it didn't work that way. I was working with the director of the food pantry, and then the director of the food pantry also needed to get approval from the lead pastor of the church. So at the point, we kept going back and forth in the last piece of the evaluation process. So you need some flexibility in working with congregation, because sometimes things might not move at your pace. Then relationship is fundamental to congregational engagement. It is, as we know, this is important to the practice, to the profession itself. It is important to note that when you're dealing with congregation, the issue of relationship is very key. Because once you have the relationship well established, you can begin to bring issues. Once they begin to trust you, you can begin to bring issues even about advocacy, even about engagement in things that are happening in the country. But from the initial relationship, once you begin to bring those issues, some of them begin to wonder, what is your agenda? Let me give you an instance. I went in to evaluate the food pantry, this same food pantry I'm making reference to. And we were going to have a listening session with the clients. And so as I stood there during when they were serving the food, before they started, and I made an announcement about trying to engage the clients in the process of gathering information that will help this food pantry. And one of the volunteers who usually goes out to share food was asking me, what is this about this evaluation of food pantry? In fact, the food pantry director, while I was discussing with her, she was like, some were even asking, what is this evaluation about? Are they going to drop us from the position where we are? What is this going to do? And so they were raising all of those questions because they were not sure if I was a representative of the government, or if I was spying, or if I was just doing something in the sake of doing an evaluation. But over time, once you build that relationship, you also build that trust, and they know that they're in safe hands even when they engage. Congregational social work can further enhance congregational engagement. So we're going to have a few minutes for discussion. And before I give you time to ask your question, I want to ask if you have ever had an experience of a moment where you have seen collaboration between a congregation and an agency. And what was that experience like? Yes.
So this year, my internship agency it's a faith-based organization, and so most of our funding and our volunteer base comes from congregations, and that's all been really, really positive. I think the thing that we're looking at now is, so we have so many volunteers and we have people who give their time and money. How can we actually draw more on the assets of the congregations as a whole, as opposed to individual volunteers and contributors, or in addition to, I should say, individual volunteers.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jess.
I think from the congregational side of things, I feel like sometimes congregations can feel like just a volunteer source, and then they're pulled. There's many agencies that need volunteers and resources, and so I think that might be one reason for lack of collaboration, because churches can be drained. Sometimes they are seen as assets, a little too much, maybe.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that point. I remember during the research, one of the things that was a challenge, because I asked a question about what are some of the challenges to the food pantry, and someone said growth. And, I was like, okay, growth. And then when the person further explained, I was like, okay, that brought the point even clearer, because so you have some churches who have food pantries, and because of referral, and they have a budget, maybe a church has a budget of $200 a month, and then because they are collaborating with another congregation, and because the news is out there that they offer these services, you have a lot of people now being referred to them, and because of that growth in their number, not every church goes back to review their budget. And so that becomes a challenge, because you have a lot of people to take care of, but then your budget is not able to take care of that. And that leaves the church with either going back to review its budget, or they face the challenge of, maybe reducing the number of things that they are able to do. And that was part of what led even to the idea of how can churches begin to collaborate with another church? What are avenues that they can do that? Okay, I will move on and give room for questions. It can come from every side, but yes, please.
John, you mentioned there was 6 churches that had they were open to collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see up there the number that actually collaborates of those 6.
Now, of those 6, during my research, initially, in my purposive sampling, I picked 3 churches that indicated that they collaborate, and then 3 churches that indicated that they do not collaborate in meeting hunger needs. But then, in the process of the interview, churches that indicated that they do not collaborate actually were giving me examples of collaboration. So that also, in my research, that led me to the question of what does even collaboration mean to churches? Because they indicated from the beginning that they do not collaborate. But during the interview, as we talked more, they started saying that, well, we collaborate, we do this, we do that. And that impacted my research, because what I had in mind was to be able to compare the churches that collaborate and the ones that do not collaborate. But that was the dynamic that came from that, yeah. Yes, please.
What would you recommend as a collaborative approach to take around an issue that might be more taboo, like child abuse or sexual assault and things like that?
That's a big question. And my recommendation will be establish relationship. There are a lot of things that you can do once you have an established relationship and you've been able to build trust. You can begin to go into areas that they usually would not want to talk about. And so that would be, at the top of my head, that would be one recommendation that I'll offer on this. Yes, sir.
What were some of the outcomes that came as a result of your work?
Talking about the research?
Well, in convening those congregations to work on particular issues.
Okay. One of the outcomes, in fact, immediately after we had the presentation on payday lending, the church's response and the community, on the issue of payday lending, the associate director of the agency of Waco Regional Baptist Association was present, and they started talking about how we can not just talk about this at that forum, but even the association has a forum. They call it the Ministers' Roundtable. So they started discussing how we can take it to the next level and engage more churches. And in fact, someone, she communicated to one of the participants on writing an article to be published in their newsletter on the issue of payday lending. So that's one way that we have. And then when we had the issue of social justice with an emphasis on the issue of hunger, we had people who were talking about, because one of the churches, after they talked about all of the things that they were doing, in fact, one church said that they used to have a food pantry, but they were not really serving the people because the things that they were given was like something that maybe will hardly even take you a meal, will cover a meal for a family of 4. So they decided to shut that to connect with or support another church. So that perspective that they brought that kind of sparked a conversation with another agency on other avenues that they could collaborate. So after that, you know, they started conversation, and some have moved beyond just that meeting to begin to implement some of these things, some of the things that we talked about. Yeah. So I saw more collaboration happening as a result of that. Now, during the presentation, because I did presentation on different things, it came down to the interest. So some churches, as soon as we talked about social justice and we mentioned the issue of hunger, and some churches learned about what other agencies were doing, and some of them with this story from this pastor about how they felt that their food pantry was ineffective in meeting the needs of the people. Some of them started talking about other possibilities of not necessarily operating theirs, but supporting another food pantry. Any other question? I'll have time for one more. Yes.
John, do you have any thoughts on helping congregations evaluate their engagement? So like if your congregation is doing XYZ and would like to consider, you know, how we could be more engaged either in what we're already doing or to expand our scope. Do you have recommendations for how to go about an evaluation process?
Now, sometimes I realize that with congregations, if it's an area of interest, it's much easier to engage them. So even when I do presentation on the ministry, the community ministries, I lay it out before them and say, these are the ministries that we have. And the asset map was also meant to draw from these churches based on their area of interest. So I think that it comes down to the interest of that church. And as you engage different churches, you realize that you might go into a church with a passion over something and you think it's a need in the community, and the church does not see that. But then they're on board with something else that you think it's maybe not a strong need in the community. So working with them at their level and also helping them understand the importance of that evaluation, that you're not spying. Because social work in the context of the church, or when you talk about the separation of church and state, is like when you're coming from the government trying to help or facilitate certain engagement. You know, not everyone builds that trust in what you're doing. So I think that it's important to build that trust level.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and taking time to be here. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
I'll take your evaluations and see you on your way out.